Hello everyone, today's video I'll be talking about Gareth Edwards' Godzilla 2014. He directed a movie prior to this called Monsters, which I heard is supposed to be a good movie. Gareth Edwards would later direct Star Wars Rogue One 2 years later, one of the spin-off Star Wars movies. This movie is the start and beginning of the Monser Verse, making it more of like Marvel Avengers MCU type. It was also a reboot to the 1998 Godzilla American film. This is the second Godzilla film not made by Toho. I know it's a Monarch Legacy Monsters TV show on Apple TV, but I won't have time to get through that. But again, I will check that show out at some point in time. This was the second Godzilla movie I ever saw in my life in the movie theaters. I saw it in the movie theaters with my dad when school got out after a long, painless semester of torture algebra. This was the first thing I did to start my summer of 2014. When I saw this movie in the movie theaters, I liked it around that time. But looking back, I may have changed my mind after hearing other people's thoughts and perspective on how this movie may not be as great as I thought it would be. Also, the marketing was false. It hyped this movie up too much for people's high expectation for Godzilla fans at the time. And I'm not saying this movie is horrible, I hate this movie by all means. It just could have been done better. The parts with Bryan Cranston and his son Aaron Taylor Johnson are good, how they try to fix their estranged relationship despite all the crazy things that are going on with Godzilla. You felt bad for Bryan Cranston's character when his wife dies, but when Bryan Cranston's character was killed off too early in the movie goes downhill after that. And around this time, Bryan Cranston was red hot with the crime drama TV show Breaking Bad as Walter White. And around that time, I had not seen an episode of Breaking Bad despite my parents were really into that show. After watching this movie, I was curious to check that show out, and it was very good. That was one of my favorite shows in the last decade. Even Bryan Cranston admits that he wishes his character was not killed off early in the movie. Ken Watanabe, you might recognize from Batman Begins and Inception, he plays Dr. Serizawa. He was alright, but he's not complex like the original, and he's not a mad scientist. There aren't many similarities between the two different Dr. Serizawas. His first name is Ashiro, a homage to Ashiro Honda, the director of the first Godzilla film. Sally Hawkins' Pre-Shape of Water plays his colleague Dr. Graham. She's a good actress, but she doesn't really have much to offer in this movie. I loved her in The Shape of Water. When I first saw this movie, looking back, I thought to myself, who knew at the time that she was going to be in a movie I really loved 3 years later, especially being a fan of The Gill Man. The movie did have good opening credits with 50s stock footage, feeling like a 50s classic sci-fi giant monster movie. The 1998 TriStar Godzilla film did the same thing too. The music is decent. Because this is an American Godzilla movie, they probably can't use the Japanese Godzilla original score. It has some good cinematography of the human's point of view, seeing the giant monsters. Seeing Godzilla's first appearance hearing roar was cool. This is also the kind of movie that had a decent solid build-up from Bryan Cranston's wife dying in a nuclear explosion caused by an earthquake leading up to Godzilla. But this build-up either was satisfying or disappointment to some Godzilla fans. Also, it did not occur to me how when I first saw this movie, just when you think you're about to see Godzilla fight a monster, it cuts to another scene. Isn't that what the Godzilla movies are all about to a certain degree, seeing Godzilla fight big giant monsters, and the characters are second? Well, despite the original Godzilla, he was a metaphor. The human characters were the main focus. In this Godzilla, he shows up 1 hour late in this movie. It doesn't have a healthy balance of Godzilla and the human characters. The mutant monsters fight in this movie look like something out of Cloverfield and Super 8. I also feel like it tried to make it feel like the original Godzilla movie, but it does not have that neo-realism documentary feel like the original one does. In the original, Godzilla was not in the movie that much, and he was a metaphor for nuclear war. This movie was like a metaphor for natural disasters, a tsunami, earthquake, of hurricane, global warming, climate change. The night scenes did not feel suspenseful or scary like in the original. In the original, it was hard to tell what was going on, but at least it kept you invested and worried for the people. In this, it was hard to tell what was going on in this movie. The part where the soldiers come out of the sky, that was cool and a little scary. It made me think, I don't want to be one of these soldiers in this situation. What if they died falling on Godzilla? The family in this movie were bland, boring, forgetful, but their acting was not bad. They just were not that interesting. Elizabeth Olsen is a good actress, but she's very bland and forgetful in this movie. Her character is very flat. Around this time, I was very familiar with Aaron Taylor Johnson from the Kick-Ass movies. It was hard to recognize him to see how he looks nothing like the Kick-Ass character in real life. He plays a nerdy kid who loves comic books, but in this movie, he looks like he's on the football team. Again, Aaron Taylor Johnson is not bad. He He's just not that interesting without Bryan Cranston. But I did like the part when he helps a little boy get separated from his family. It shows his good nature side. This is the kind of movie where the acting was good, but the characters are very forgetful. I'm not very invested in these characters like in the original Godzilla movie. The look of Godzilla is an upgrade compared to the 98 Godzilla look design. He almost looks close to a Godzilla look. It's CGI and it's sad it's not a guy in a rubber suit, but that's the way things are in movies today. I wish it was a guy in a rubber suit. This is one of the only few movies Godzilla does not destroy many buildings, despite lots of buildings do get destroyed, but it's not Godzilla. Godzilla first was a bad guy, then he later becomes the good guy in the movie, so this makes him an anti-hero. I didn't expect Godzilla to go from being a bad guy to a good guy in the end. The trailers made it look like Godzilla was going to be the bad guy throughout the majority of the movie. In the 1998 TriStar Godzilla movie, attacks New York City, in this movie it was Honolulu and Las Vegas, change of scenery. It's very common in action movies, comic book movies, disaster giant monster movies that take place in New York City. But I'm sure there are other sci-fi giant monster movies that don't always take place in New York City. Here are my friend Christian's thoughts on Godzilla 2014.
Okay, so Godzilla 2014. I do enjoy this one. I enjoy it, but it's also not what it could have been, I think. Like, it could have been better. It's certainly not what the trailers promoted, because the trailers kind of promoted this almost as a horror film. Like, the trailers promoted something much darker, and it's a cliche at this point, but yeah, Bryan Cranston really should have lived throughout the whole movie, because he was really elevating a lot of this material. That being said, it's not a bad movie. I enjoy this one quite a bit. It's definitely not as bad as some people have made it out to be. And as for the whole, there's not enough Godzilla in it, well, welcome to your first Godzilla movie.
It's an alright movie, not as hyped up for when I first saw it in the movie theaters, and it's one I've rarely gone back to rewatch. It's a mixed movie. Some people like this, some fans don't like it. For me, I'm in between. Parts of it I liked, other parts just didn't seem natural, organic to me. What's funny about this movie is Godzilla fans compare this movie to what the TriStar Godzilla movie did better than this movie. Wow, what a shocker. What's next? Comparing Batman and Robin did better than the 2022 The Batman, or what Superman 4 did better than The Man of Steel. That wraps up today's video. Stay tuned for the sequel, Godzilla King of the Monsters. See you next time.